I was trying to make it work when I knew it wasn't going to work. And I was committing to something that, I knew I'd broken up earlier in the relationship, and then...
And what made you want to hang on, you think?
Catholic guilt or...
That's a thing. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Uncoupling, where we talk about breakups, but more importantly, how to move through with self-empowerment. Today we have on the program Matt Walsh.
Thank you for having me, Holland. It's a pleasure.
He is a two-time Emmy-nominated actor known for Veep and Unplugging and Flamin' Hot. He also has a new series on Apple Plus called Manhunt coming out, and he is a fellow podcaster, co-host of Second in Command, and Corporate Angel is an organization that means a lot to you.
Corporate Angel Networks is a group that flies cancer treatment patients for free to various treatment centers around the country.
And I have never heard of any kind of organization like that. So when we were talking about that before we started rolling, and I thought that was an important plug to put in there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So if anybody wants to check out Corporate Angel, please do. I love getting a comedian's take, in a sense. I know comics and comedians don't feel like they're the same type of person, but I do love when we talk about uncoupling. Mm-hmm. Everyone likes to stigmatize that as a failure. If something doesn't work out, it's a failure. As far as social media goes, a lot of these Gen Zers and millennials will have the boyfriend or the girlfriend all over social media, and then one day they're just vacant. Mm-hmm. And I think with the rise of social media, we are much more vulnerable to have conversations with strangers. But when it comes to breakups, that's still it's pretty antiquated mindset of, oh, no, we don't go there. And so this is a podcast to really unpack there's nothing wrong with ending a relationship and how we should healthily move through those relationships, because most relationships don't work out. Thankfully, Matt's been with his wife for 16 years.
We've been together
longer.
Since November 2005, so that's 18 years we've been together, basically, and married for like 16.
So he's one of the ones where it worked out.
Yeah, day to day.
Day to day.
So far, so good.
24 hours.
Yeah, you got to keep working on it. You got to keep working on it. Yeah, that's right.
And so how did you meet your wife? Is she in the entertainment industry?
She is. She's an actor, and I was in New York at UCB doing a midnight show, comedy show, one of those midnight shows that the people performing were having more fun than the audience. And she happened to be in the audience. She's very attractive. And I noticed her during the show. Then after the show, I went out to see, like, who's that beautiful woman? And then she says she forgot her coat because she came back into the theater to get her coat. And then I saw her and I approached her. And
was that a move, you think?
I think she unconsciously wanted to meet me. That's what I think.
Is that what she says too?
She'll say no. She legit forgot her coat. So it's a great ongoing conversation.
Pretty girls forget their coats.
I don't know. It's like when you have an audition, like, why do I do this? It's like this weird, like, you have to go back in to get your backpack. There's something like...
The Irish goodbye at an audition is the worst. Or not the Irish goodbye. I think it's called the Jewish goodbye, where you say goodbye twice.
Is it? Oh, that's funny. I have friends who do that too.
I love it. I am of the latter. It's so humiliating when I have to go back in and get something else.
I have a friend who is the king of the long goodbye. Like, he's like, okay, I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. And he'll be there an hour later because he admitted that when you're leaving is when people are most affectionate and most appreciative of, like, oh, my God. Like, when you're leaving, they're opening up. Like, it was so great to see you. And he likes to live in that.
Now we're just beginning. Right.
But it's when you come in, it's like, hey, and you have small talk. But when you're leaving, people get a little more precious about, like, oh, I may not see you for a while.
It's so true.
And so he likes to live in that. And I thought, that's great. That's good honesty.
Maybe subconsciously, that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
Where I prolong, and I also just don't like goodbyes. And maybe that's why people grasp onto it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Because it's the imminent of we're about to separate on a subconscious level.
Yeah. I don't like goodbyes, so I just leave.
You're the Irish goodbye.
That's the Irish goodbye. But similarly, I'm not a fan of the goodbye. And I find it complicated to execute multiple goodbyes and find people that you want to say goodbye to. It's like navigating the party, and So that's why I do the Irish goodbye generally.
I think there's a study of people that Irish goodbye. How many more months do they have on their life of not rehashing a goodbye? It's something
you get
significant.
time?
You gain
you get
3
to bed
months,
earlier. Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny. That is interesting, though. When people say goodbye, it's the most heightened emotion, and that can be also applied to breakups, as well, which is quite funny.
Breakups are heightened emotion too, but yeah.
So when she came back in to get her coat, how did you make a move?
I was just your show's about relationships, obviously, and I think at that point in my life, I was in a more fully formed version of myself, and I didn't necessarily care to like present myself in a way that was inauthentic. I was very confident with like, this is who I am, accepting of myself. You know how you go on that, because relationships, I was thinking about relationships before I came on your show, and they're really about yourself. They're really about when are you ready to be a better partner. And like you said, it's not a failure when you date someone and it doesn't like continue to be a couple. That's not a failure. That's very normal. And I think the journey of dating and finding better relationships is really about your own personal journey, developing who you are, being a better friend, being a better partner, being a healthier human, all that stuff. So for whatever reason, I, in that moment in my life, had gotten out of something serious probably a year and a half before this. So I was sort of like in this mode of like, this is who I am, not to gain anything, not to impress, but to just be myself. And I saw this woman I liked, and I'm like, you know, you're pretty, and I think you're cool, or you seem cool. And it turned out she was there on vacation, and I was there doing a job, but I'd also ended the job. So we both had like a week in New York of free time, and so we just started planning dates every day.
Richard Linklater movie began.
It was like a before sunset in New York. And it's very fortunate because it's like Manhattan's like a cruise ship. There's always something to do. And I had lived in New York and she wasn't familiar, so I could walk around and show her my favorite restaurant. We went to theater. We went to my favorite, museums. And it was like this dream honeymoon to really fast enjoy each other. And I think, too, like there was no veil or on my end,
no
personally, I was just sort of candidly myself in a good way, honest, and not that before that I was like tricking people who I am, but I think there is a certain, when you're younger, you try to present who you are, but you're not really, you may be masking or you may not be vulnerable in some ways, and I think for whatever reason at that moment in time I was closer to who I wanted to be and was more accepting of who I was.
So being at that point in your life where you were ready for, like you said, a broader horizon that included more than just you because you were so comfortable with yourself. And then this character that is Manhattan, the cruise ship. I love that analogy.
It was. And I think
that was the gift.
And just like presenting myself, like it wasn't going to turn different in my mind. Like this, sometimes when you start dating someone, we're drawn by like beauty or charm, and those are very important, and that's very normal, or status if you're the high school quarterback and like, oh my God, he's the quarterback, whatever. We have those things, and so I guess I had some of that because I was a performer and slowly into my career, so I had some status, but I don't think that mattered. But it's more about like once that stuff fades away, which it does, I was still kind of who I had presented myself, so there was no like, oh, this is who you are, I think. So that's the good fortune of it too, if that makes sense.
How old were you when you met her?
39, 38. She's younger, too. She's like 13 years younger.
13 years younger.
Yeah, so she was 27.
And she was in a place in her life where she already had significant uncouplings. She had significant relationships.
Yeah, she'd been through a bunch of relationships and, had lived with people, and but we were both living in LA, which was also it was very lucky. Like,
the fact you had this suspended time
we met in New York,
the best first date.
And then the realization of like, well, I live in LA. Oh, we can continue dating. Like, it was very easy to continue the relationship. Yeah, it was very serendipitous. There's a little bit of luck, obviously, to meet someone like that. And she's also very like, her journey in that moment, she's very like, I guess spiritual. Like she's always like in the car, like she'll see a license plate and it'll have like her birth date on it, or like she's always looking for signs in the universe. Mm-hmm. She's that person. And so she had this epiphany on the train supposedly, or truthfully, coming into the show, she's like, I think I'm going to meet someone special tonight. Like she felt
did
that.
not say that.
She did to her, like she was having this like journey, and I don't know what triggered it, whether the magic of New York or she saw something, but she's always like tuning into these like spiritual moments and opportunities. So she was equally open to meeting someone.
I've had that happen one time to me where I said I had gone through a pretty heavy breakup, and some time had passed, and I said, I was on a plane, and I said the same thing, and I did meet someone very special, and it's the only time I've ever said that sentence.
Yeah,
and it's really, I do tend to think it's got to have some sort of multi-dimensional something we're unaware of consciously of why does that happen.
She's big on that. I don't know that I operate the same way, but she definitely operates on like the invisible things that present themselves or listening or
I don't know if it's true, but I just don't know what I don't know. That's all I know.
No, it can be true. It can be certainly it can be true for you, or if it works for you. And I think I remember during the pandemic I was listening to this thing, and some person in a book I read was like telling yourself every morning something good's going to happen today. It's almost like looking for positivity. Mm-hmm. So if you frame your morning like that, then you're looking for signs of positivity, which opens you up to success and connection. And so that frame of like seeing the universe as presenting opportunities or signs is a great way to go through life, because I think you land in positive situations or you frame the world in a better way.
There's a YouTube couple that she always says, today's going to be a good day. Today's going to be a good day.
My father used to say that. He would always say, never had a bad day.
Never had a bad day.
Which wasn't true, but he was also a salesman, so I think he psyched himself up with that.
He sold himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you say you had done a ton of self-work, or you had just come to a place in your life at 38, 39 where you said you felt really whole, was there a particular previous relationship that brought you to that place? Was it through the recovery of the breakup that brought you to that place? Was there a significant pivot that you felt so at peace with when you met your wife?
Yeah, I think through the course of my life, I had dated and had, serious relationships with people before that. And then I think a year and a half I had been engaged to someone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was the learning lesson of that is like, on my side, I was trying to make it work when I knew it wasn't going to work. And I was committing to something that, I knew I'd broken up earlier in the relationship. And then.
And what made you want to hang on, you think?
Catholic guilt or.
That's a thing.
It's a thing. Like, I don't know, maybe you think you're less than or something, like, oh, I should feel grateful.
It's the failure aspect.
Yeah, the lucky. I don't, and also, truthfully, someone you care about, like, crying and saying, let's try to make that, like, they still want it to work, makes you
want to still fight for it.
Give over to maybe their point of view. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you know factually, this is not going to work. We're not great for each other. It's not super fun, whatever, and she's a great person. I'm a good person. But it's like when they're someone you care about and their feelings and their success, and they're presenting you this like tumultuous emotion and begging, you or pleading a little bit. Begging's not the right word, but like saying we should know, don't quit or whatever. You can't get sucked into that against your better knowledge. So that's all of it, I think.
Right. This is not exactly the analogy, but there's a quote that says, not that anybody is sick because neither party is sick, but somebody says either the saddest person or the sickest person or the weakest person, not to say that any of those are necessarily comparable, but that usually leads the relationship. The more emotional common denominator, the bigger that will lead the relationship. And so when you already love somebody and they're asking something of you, you're obligated just instinctually to want to make it work.
Well, similarly, like in comedy rooms, the person who's most passionate about the idea usually wins. Okay. So I would equate that to passion. Yeah, most emotional, most like passionate. Strongest fight. Everybody in the room's like, all right, I guess, 6 and 1/2 dozen people are just like, okay, you get it. I'll give you that. You get the idea. You get the joke.
So being engaged and then that not working out, and you, like you said, felt
Don't say
in your-
working out.
Oh,
Again, that's
okay.
loaded.
Okay, yeah. So
It didn't come to fruition,
It didn't
or
come
it
to
didn't
fruition.
turn into a marriage.
it didn't turn into
Thank
a marriage.
God.
How did you move through that recovery process?
Well, the journey of that relationship, like you said, we often date people and we're serial monogamous, and then we move on. That particular relationship, there was an engagement ring. I don't think the wedding was ever really going to happen, but we were engaged. And at some point, we had broken up before probably the engagement, and then we got back together. So it was sort of troubled, and for whatever reason, I wasn't strong enough to really get out of it. So at some point, I said goodbye to the relationship, and I fortunately had a job in LA, so I moved to LA. So I physically removed myself from the city of that relationship, and that really helped me making that clean break. So a change of scenery really benefited me.
The luck of employment took you away.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was lucky to have something and a reason to move, but I might have moved anyways just to get out, because at some point in New York, for comedy, there's like SNL and The Daily Show, which I'd done The Daily Show. So there's less opportunity. So LA had already been calling. So there's a version where I would have moved anyways without like a landing spot. You know
So
what I
it
mean?
was almost two forces working in a different, I wouldn't say against you or for you, but just there was several forces that were leading you in a different direction, not only emotionally, but
Yeah.
there was something
Opportunity.
subconsciously
Yeah,
calling.
yeah. And many of my friends from New York had already moved to LA. So there was like a network of people that were my crew that I was like, I should probably move to LA. So fortunately, when I broke up, I moved to LA. And in that year and a half, I actually was living with my brother, the one I had mentioned
He
earlier.
lives here.
And we were living like bachelors. We had like a TV in every room, and there were like poker games all the time. It was very much like a old school, the movie or something.
That's recovery.
I think it was. It was very sort of self-indulgent, pardon me. And yeah, I wasn't really necessarily looking. I was just sort of enjoying LA and doing fun things and performing, at the theater, et cetera, et cetera. But it was sort of me-based. Yeah.
You
I think
wouldn't
it was.
have had time to date.
No, I don't think. I mean,
Finding your
I'm sure I
footing?
did a little bit. And then what transformed in that period is I do remember having a conversation with a buddy of mine when I landed in LA, and I was still carrying some guilt about like, oh, I should have made it work. Like there's something about like you declare you're going to get married, and then everyone knows you're going to get married, and then you don't get married. It's almost like a divorce. Like you've declared this thing's going to happen. So there was that, you know what I mean?
You've changed your identity.
Yeah,
once you've
or
already
like
stated
the
it.
word breakup means like you failed at something. And so
Right.
I was carrying that, and I remember him saying like, he's like, dude, you're going to be, once you're over this, you're going to be on the better side of it so much better. Like he basically said like, you're on the other side of this with a little time, you're going to be so much better off. Trust me, you're going to land
Is your brother
in the
saying
best.
this?
No, this is a buddy of mine.
Buddy of yours.
Excuse me. He was telling me, and I really believed him, and that really,
And he was right.
well, it opened me up to the possibility of like letting go this guilt of failure into landing in a spot where I'm so much better off and meeting someone that I'm much better suited for. And so that conversation stuck with me. And I don't know that I did a lot of heavy like personal development, but I was sort of willing to just do what I focus on myself a little bit, have fun, not worry
The
about.
artist way, you were dating yourself.
I was. I had an artist date with Julie Cameron, and I did my morning pages.
It's a great book.
I did it. It
Talked
is a
about
great
this
book.
Podcast, yes.
So I think that's what that year and a half before I met my wife Morgan sort of served as just self-concern in a way and fun.
Indulgence is absolutely a form
Yeah,
of
indulgence.
recovery.
Yeah.
That's not a bad word. It's often slanted to be, opulent or gluttonous, but it's not. I think
And I
indulgence
think
absolutely has a
reconnecting with all the
place.
people that were my buddies in New York, reconnecting with them, so you're sort of reestablishing connection with people you care about as well.
Reestablishing, I think, who you were at your core, who you had built yourself to be as an adult, not the Catholic guilt that you built up as a child. It was more, this is who I am as an adult. I have all these amazing colleagues. We all really enjoy comedy together.
Yeah.
And you got to lean into what you were building when you set out to become an artist.
Yeah, I think what happens sometimes, yeah, and I think examining life in a bigger way. Like I think sometimes when we're in relationships, we become very myopic. Like one of the my wife and I moved from like our first house to another house, and I just remember hating the move because the move felt so myopic. Like we have to get tile, we have to meet a guy, and it just felt like we weren't even looking at the news. You know what I mean? Like everything was so about because we had a kid and we were gonna have another kid. So, but it just felt selfish isn't the right word, but it just felt like you're so locked into your little life, and it's important because you're building a life for your family and each other, and it's a wonderful opportunity to move into a home and pick a color for a wall. Like it's great, but I was also sort of disgusted with how myopic our lives have become. And so sometimes in relationships, your worldview, whether it's usually when it's going bad, it's so myopic and it's so focused and like look at the world, like look at the sunrise, look at a sunset. Like a big part of life is like looking at everything.
Step
like
back.
step back and like you're a small part, like you said in showbiz. Like I am a semi-regular on a giant machine that makes 1 million shows a year. Like perspective is really,
yes.
And so getting out of New York, getting out of that relationship, really opened up my perspective to so many things. How big the world is, what's certainly more important, and I think that's a big part of it too.
Coming from comedy, do you feel like there's a lot of analogies or just metaphors that you found throughout life, throughout relationships? Either the bonding over a misery likes company, you know, in a breakup, or when you guys will almost trauma bond over all of the grievances of life. You were doing stand up, right?
No, I wasn't a stand up. I did sketch. I did stand up. I came out of Chicago, did sketch and improv, and then mostly like sketch and improv for the rest of my life. So
this is after an improv show that you met her.
I did like kind of an midnight improv comedy show.
Okay.
I was like drinking and smoking on stage. Like I didn't care too. Like I wasn't drunk, but I wasn't like a great show. But I was also sort of didn't really care in a way how I was presenting myself in a good way.
Well, improv is one of the most vulnerable yet useful tools that I say it doesn't matter if you're an actor or not. Everybody should take an improv class. And do you feel like the safe room of an improv class or the improv? I mean, you started the godfather of improv companies. You were one of the co-founders of Upright Citizens Brigade. So do you feel like if anybody hasn't taken an improv class, they make you do very silly things, really fun games that connect you as a group, and you become very, I would say quickly bonded with relative strangers. And do you think that helped you in your dating life? Because you were this, you have to be a bleeding heart to some degree or a vulnerable person.
Think this is like, I think being funny helps you be attractive.
Absolutely.
To people. There's like physical beauty and charm and other elements or physical stature or whatever. I think there are certain things that we as dumb animals are attracted to. And so I do think like being funny has helped me meet, people or date people that like found it interesting. So sure. So in that way, I think improv or comedy has helped me in my dating life. And then as far as like everyone taking improv class, I always say that the most important skill about, this is my guarded body language, I'm noticing this. The most important skill in improv is listening. It teaches you to listen, relinquish your own idea, and collaborate with someone else. And then...
that could literally be a therapist talking about a relationship right there.
You think?
Listening, relinquishing your ideas, and engaging in the present moment.
Yeah.
That's the foundation of improv, and that's the foundation of at least the foundation of a healthy relationship.
Probably, yeah, because you do have to relinquish your needs and try to hear what your partner's saying.
Still hold value in your need, but you have to at least hear the other person.
In reality, in a relationship, you're not like doing it to build something comedic. You're doing it to dive into what's really behind it. Like they say, that they're not really, what they're saying is not what they're saying. You know what I mean? Like that's what therapy and like sort of couples work teaches you is like she says you didn't clean the room.
But really
Or
she means.
Really she means like I get panicked because I had this childhood and it feels like there's no safety when the sink is dirty. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
and so
right.
then that's what you have to understand. And that's a deeper, harder muscle, I think.
Absolutely. I think that the structure of improv and relationships are built on vulnerability and being open.
Yeah. But also comedy is devil's advocate. Comedy is a defense mechanism. Like I don't want to get deep, therefore I deflect with humor. Like people want to
Right.
engage in a serious or heavy conversation. Comedy will often
interesting.
come out too.
Right.
And I was a
right.
psych major in college. I was going to be a psychologist. That's what I
It
studied
is.
in
It is
college.
funny how artists and psychology are like the others. You know, the two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
different execution.
What do you mean by that? What is it the
So I always
common-
said I wanted to be an anthropologist if I wasn't
Oh.
an actor, and that's sort of the macro of the micro. I mean, the macro of studying humans' patterns and human culture is studying a lot of different psychologies. It's going more macro versus the micro of why we do certain things, but you
Yeah.
study that in massive patterns.
Yeah.
And so I feel like actors and people that love stories, it's a very close cousin
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
in psychology.
That's
so,
true.
So do you feel like comedy hurt your not necessarily dating life, but once you got into relationships, did you find that you had to uncondition a mechanism that was so obviously professionally tied to you, but a profession that I'm assuming meant a lot to you, and it really resonated with you?
Yeah, I think it's a lifelong like personality trait. I probably always like to be funny, and it gets you attention. Like all actors like attention, and that validation from an audience validates us. But yet, we need to learn to self-validate. So there's that journey, and I think I think in some ways the ability to go deeper and suspend or table comedic instincts is part of my journey. Sure, with people that are close to me. I don't have to be that way with everyone. But
Right.
But yeah, so if it's a defense mechanism, I had to go investigate that and look through that and suspend it at times so more real, deeper conversations could happen. Sure.
Like the earlier relationships, when you look back, that led you to your wife now. That were there any women that are like, you don't take it seriously and you deflect?
Yeah, I mean,
and you do a cop-out
certainly in college, I would equate that very much so in college and immaturity, whatever, male immaturity or my immaturity. I think that was part of it. Yeah, I think I have flashes of hearing that from women I dated, certainly in college, where I wasn't like taking things seriously too much.
So when you would go through a breakup, who did you turn to first? Was it people in a troupe that you were in? Was it your parents? Was it siblings? Was there a particular checklist that you went through?
I don't know if it was a consistent checklist. Like I have close friends who I can always lean on. Some still, some living. I came out of Chicago, so some are still living in Chicago. I have a brother. I'm one of like 7 kids, but I have a brother who lives here in LA, and we're very close, and talk to him every day, and so I could always lean on him at the various moments as a struggling artist. I always had roommates,
Yeah. The ebb and flow of Los Angeles.
Well, I did New York for 8 years, so I
Oh,
was living in like
wow.
a 2-bedroom with like 3 other guys and a tiny. I did that for a while, and
Yeah.
so I always had close friends who I was living with, so I could share with them, and then some. And some of them are still very good friends, so they were those were deeper relationships that I could trust and share, like whatever my disappointment or questioning after a breakup. Sure, but there was no like got to go to this guy, and then I'm going to go to this guy, and then throughout my life I've done therapy, and I think that's
yeah.
a safe venue to like examine yourself and your
External sources.
relationship patterns.
Did you ever have a breakup that was just the funniest breakup?
I have a question. Why is it a breakup? Is that the right word? Like breakup is negative, right?
It is negative.
And like you said, like it's not a failure.
No.
So that's not a good word.
It's like it's a parting of the ways. There's a pivot.
Yeah.
I always say embrace the pain because the more you resist the pain, the more painful it gets.
Yeah.
So if you can just say, take a seat, high pain, I'll pull you up a chair.
Yeah.
And we're going to go run through the pain, and you're not going to fight it. You'll just, the only maybe friction moment is that beginning of a run, or I'm going to put clothes on and go meet friends for coffee. That's maybe the hardest moment. But the pain will still be there as you drive to the coffee shop or walk to the gym. It's still going to be there when you open your mouth and give a hug and try and focus on what your friend's talking about, but it's still in your brain.
Yeah.
And obviously the people that love you know that that's the dialogue going on in your head in a really vulnerable point in your life. But I would say some of my exes still live in my brain. And one guy's just got a little tiny little chair in the corner. And I think about him weekly, and he's just a part of like who I love, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean I'm supposed to be with him. That doesn't mean we even have ESP. That just means he changed me on a molecular level, and that's okay.
Do you keep in touch with a lot of your exes, or like your serious relationships, or?
I have one that we're still very, we had a 2 to 3 year break, but we didn't talk. He dated other people, and now he's genuinely like a family member to me. And we also know each other through a lot of mutual friends, and so we have a lot of overlap as well. That we would see each other anyway. Out of probably
whatever
7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then so the other 6 or so you don't keep touch with.
I have an ex-boyfriend in high school that we dated in high school. We texted for 17 years. So what generation we grew up in had a big part to do with how we kept in touch, which is a question I have for you is
but wait, I want to ask you this question.
I'll come back to that.
So
I'll come back to that.
Let's assume high school relationships don't count.
No. So we actually dated for 3.5 years after texting for 17 years.
Oh, okay. It came back.
Came back.
Okay.
And so I thought, surely that's your soulmate of somebody you've texted with for almost 2 decades after high school that you were with for the majority of high school. Then I was with a solid segment as an adult as well. And it turns out he's probably the second person that can live in my brain, but maybe not quite as heavily because I was a lot older and more mature to handle that truly uncoupling.
And what is your take on not keeping touch with like serious relationship people from your life? Is that healthy? Is that unhealthy? Is that normal?
The high school boyfriend, I have a lot of love for. We just ultimately weren't compatible in enough of our daily lifestyle. He's such a great guy.
Yeah.
He's such a lovely human being.
Yeah.
And I want him to be happy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think for me, like in the vein of what you're saying, like you don't want to feel that conflicting two truths. You don't want to experience that. And being around them makes you feel that.
We're just not used to it. We're really unfamiliar with it because we're taught such finite conditioning. It's either this or that.
Right.
It's apples or oranges. And
friends or dating is another one. Yeah,
what are we? We're constantly wanting to define things.
Right.
And so the older we get in relationships, he doesn't live so permanently in my brain, the high school boyfriend, because I was older when we broke up and I understood what that meant.
But I think that is a common thing, like guys or gals prefer after a serious relationship. It's probably, I would say most people probably prefer not to have that person in their life.
Well, it's also
just
making
easier.
space for another person when
you
are they're physically in your face. It's our animal brains attach too quickly, where logically we just succumb to like kid brain, and it's not holding space to create new memories. And there is, unfortunately, an out of space, out of mind.
Right.
And so, do you think texting has, from your being in a committed relationship way before apps and texting existed?
I'm old.
What is your takeaway on that from friends that are younger that have been dating, or friends that are your age that have been dating with apps?
Yeah, I mean,
how would you
my gut
approach that?
reaction is like apps can work. I know people who meet people on dating apps and it works out and they meet a wonderful person and their life is more fulfilled because this connection was made through technology. But it's also very presentational in a way that, not that like when we go to a party, we brush our teeth and we, put on makeup. We are presentational when we go out to potentially meet someone as well. So it's not brand new either. But there's something very presentational and curated about, here's 10 questions that you're going to present yourself to potential people to date or hook up with or whatever. And it's like you're creating a social media persona in some ways. And that's just odd to me. I don't know if it's bad or good, but it's just that's part of it. So I find that strange. And also, like, I don't know, like there's something working back from, like, if you're on a dating app and then you scroll and then it's like the coworker you work with and she's like 2 offices down. Right. It's like this window into. Do you know what I mean? It's so exposed. You know them before you know them. You know them, but in that way you don't know them. But now you're looking at, and you can go through her 10 questions. There's something inappropriate Exposing. About, like how much exposure you get once you're inside the app. And so that's abnormal to me. So those are my like quick takes. And then, but yeah, I mean, it's here to stay, like texting and.
Are you glad you didn't have texting when you were dating your wife?
I mean, we did. No, I'm not that old. Jesus. I guess we met in 05.
You said you didn't have cell phones.
I said my dating history started
cell phones.
Before
That's
cell
right.
phones.
That's right.
Like
That's
I would
right.
talk to a girl and my brothers upstairs would get on the phone and listen and make fun of me. Like, so we had one phone
do you feel like texting would have helped you in your early dating career, or do you feel like you were happy as a man
privacy.
You had to get on the phone?
Texting affords a certain amount of privacy, so that's positive, but it also lives on forever and it lacks nuance, so that's challenging.
So this is a fun game we play called the Lightning Round, which is pretty indicative to what it sounds like. It's going to be either one-word answers or one-sentence answers, as short as you can, and whatever the first thing that comes to mind. Just a few questions. When was your first breakup? How old were you?
Freshman year in college.
And do you remember your first crush?
Jessica Lange in Tootsie. She was gorgeous.
Go. Jessica Lange. What is your model relationship?
I think of one couple comes to mind where they're both super smart and they're both very independent and curious people, and they have extremely full independent lives, but they're also very committed to each other.
And what is your go-to breakup movie, if you have one?
Step Brothers made me laugh.
Step Brothers is always the go-to
funny.
Man.
I was having a really bad day, and it just turned it around.
What is your breakup song?
The Smiths or like The Cure. I think that moody, first wave stuff is very sad, emotive of that.
Breakup food, or what was the kind of cuisine that you found yourself divulging in for 18 months in Los Angeles?
Yeah. Well,
probably diner food. I don't know if that's accurate.
It was such a bachelor home. I had a stove in this house that I'd moved into, and we never fixed it, so every meal was grilled. We would go outside on the grill.
Funny.
So it was like burgers, steaks, wings, just like everything was on the grill.
Everything on the grill.
So grilled meats. Grilled meats.
That's hilarious. The first thing you did after breakups?
I would say probably writing, either just a morning page-esque kind of thing, reflective stuff, or like purposeful, like I'll write a sketch or I'll write a scene or something.
And then what is your number one red flag in a relationship or potential relationship?
I can only see it through watching it. And if I'm with someone and they're in a relationship and someone in that relationship exhibits an extreme amount of control, whether it's like we're leaving now kind of moment or dismissing an opinion in a continual way, that to me is a red flag. If somebody in that relationship is super controlling, I see that as a red flag.
And what is the number one green flag in a relationship or a potential relationship?
I think laughter and nostalgia for shared moments.
That's a good one. We call it the beige flag, but what we're really good at getting after is what is a fun quirk about yourself that your partners have said they have loved about you?
in my past, I have been sort of clueless to social clues or social etiquette. And sometimes it provides my wife with discomfort, but at sometimes she finds it very endearing.
Okay.
That's my best answer for that.
The social, not ineptness, but the ineptness to just cues. The last but not least, how did you know that your wife was the one? What was the moment that you knew?
I would just say prolonged honesty. I don't know if there was like she came out of the subway and I saw her and I'm like, this is the one I'm going to marry. But the consistent, prolonged honesty that I felt with her and she felt with me pretty quick.
Have you guys ever recreated the same spots or through all the trips to New York, I'm sure, over the years?
We have gone back to a couple, but we haven't like hit them all. But yeah, we've gone back to a couple. And there's like the dog in Central Park who has a statue, Balto. Mm-hmm. He has a plaque underneath him. He delivered medicine to an Inuit village in Alaska by dog sled. And so he's been memorialized with this big bronze statue. Anyways, that was one of our first moments in New York, in Central Park. We went to the New York City Marathon, which is one of my favorite events. Mm-hmm. And we we saw the dog. And then I proposed to her at that statue. Oh. So it has like a weird, recurring like memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And last but not least, what are your words of wisdom? If you had an elevator pitch for anyone going through an uncoupling, what would you want to tell them?
My hot take on that is like you will be so much better on the other side of it. You really will. Be open to that possibility. You really will. I believe that. Oh, and I was going to tell you there's a book called The Dark Night of the Soul if you haven't read it. It's really good.
Okay, I haven't read that.
It's about, because seemingly I think what you get at is the transformative power of these breakups and the challenges they present. This guy's book is all about these dark moments in our life, like allowing to feel them, blah, 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 and how they transform you.
The Dark Night of the Soul.
Dark Night of the Soul, Thomas More.
Thomas More. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible conversation. Thank you, Matt, for being here and being so candid.
Nice. Thank you.
And we'll see you next week for another episode of Uncoupling. And don't forget to subscribe to our Patreon channel. Uncoupling Podcast is produced by Stampede Ventures, Jason R. Ellis, and Holland Roden.